also a board member of ABAN. So Tarek, you are most welcome, please. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. How's everything going and how are you today? Joining from all over the world. I'm not sure if you can see my video or not.
Yes, I can see your video.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for putting this together and thank you for having me. I'm representing the Africa Business Angel Network as a board member. I've seen a lot of activities that have been going on with ABAN, and this webinar is part of the series of webinars and the last of the 4 webinars that are leading to ACES in November. It's the Africa Early Angel Investment Summit. And the goals of the summit and the goals of the webinar is actually to share learnings from all stakeholders and all participants of the startup community, from when it comes to founders, entrepreneurs, investors, supporting and development organizations, the incubators, accelerators, policymakers, and corporates. So this is one of the goals. We also aim to encourage the synergies that are created between the key players so that we can enable these great ideas and these great startups to start, grow, and scale faster with the digital trade, within the digital trading sector. Also discussing challenges and opportunities in the Africa digital trade ecosystems. So ABAN is taking this initiative as a leading role to support the growth of early stage capital in the digital trade sector. And we believe that this will be done by creating a cross-border angel group or a network that will invest in innovations in digital trade. We'll invite all the investors to connect with ABAN if they're interested to joining this group. And as you know, ABAN has actually attracted more than 1,500 angels, 56 angel networks till now in more than 30 countries. So we're very excited to be part of that and actually taking a leading role. And I look forward to having a great webinar today and a great event in November. So I'd like to thank the ACES team, the Africa Business Angel Network team, the VC4Africa team, the African European Digital Innovation Bridge, and all the panelists and the audience. Thanks a lot for joining today. I'm very excited to be with you. Over to you.
I think we may have lost Phil.
All right, I think I'm up.
Okay, over to you, Fadila. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tarek, for this great welcome remark. And I would like to take this opportunity to also welcome everyone on this webinar today. And my goal before the end of this session will be to give a little brief overview of the African digital trade sector. Well, I would like to start by pretty much sharing a definition of what we know as digital trade. It is a digitally embedded transaction of trade in goods and services that can either be digitally or physically delivered, and that involve consumer, firms, and government. And we know that we can also notice that through digital tools like mobile phone, today on the continent, we can access markets, we can have access to also assets, and we can have access to services. We can pay for those assets and services at the same time. So digital tools on the continent have increased the scale, the scope, and the speed of trade. These tools have helped the firm to bring new products and services to a large number of digitally connected customers across the continent. It has also helped companies, notably smaller ones, to use innovative tools to overcome barriers to growth, helping facilitate payment and allowed collaboration. And today, when we talk about digital trade, we must all note that digital trade is embedded in all economic sectors, which include agriculture, energy, logistics, finance, construction, real estate, hospitality, entertainment, just to name a few. And if we look at the past 20 years on the continent, we can also note that there has been a large number of businesses that have been creating a vibrant market. We have observed changes in the e-commerce across the continent. And these innovation or these new founders or these companies have developed innovative solutions to Africa challenges around trade, payment, and logistics. And I would like to take an example of a company based in Kenya called Dukwa, who is currently solving the logistic and the delivering inefficiency in Africa and across in Kenya and across Africa. There's another example of a company called Nyakobok, a company based in Senegal, which is an e-commerce platform that is facilitating remittances into Senegal. Overall, when you look at it, you're saying, okay, we have digital trade. And digital trade itself is gaining a lot of investment traction from pre-seed to seed level. So out of the 28 disclosed funding deals for the month of August, 8 deals were in digital trade. And we're seeing more and more of this transaction coming on board and actually attracting a number of early stage investors as well as VC companies that are very much willing to take the risk. And of course, because there's potential on the continent. And we also look at other players that are playing a significant role within that sector. And these are the innovation hub. These are capacity builders that are currently building or making founders within the digital trade investor ready. And they thought on how the capacity are being built, whether they are technical or soft skills related. And we are seeing a number of these innovation hubs or incubator emerging also on the continent that are focusing on making sure that the new founders, well, the new and emerging founders have the necessary tools in order to build solutions that will contribute to the deepening of digital trade on the continent. And we have also seen a number of policies that are emerging in order to facilitate trade, and especially digital trade. But we also see that there's a lack, well, I will say there's a little bit of a gap in terms of understanding of digitalization and how and the role that it will play into trade. So we at ABAN and other stakeholders who have been contributing to the growth of this sector would like to note that a lot of African government needs to build and deploy digital economy policy that will open up and connect economies while also creating opportunities for the growing youth. And we hope that by doing so, they will be addressing a number of challenges, including improving the business environment for digital trade and also increasing the financing for early stage founders on the continent. And well, there are also a number of effort that has been taken into account, so far on the continent. And I would like to specifically highlight some of these initiatives, which include the African Free Trade, Continental Free Trade Area, which could be considered as an enabler of digital trade. And we hope that the integration that is being envisioned by the African Continental Free Trade will really facilitate the development of the supply chain and making it less exposed to the changes of the global pricing. And on top of that, we'd like to also mention that there are a number of regional economic effort that is being taken into account to better trade, to kind of build a better trade network that can also withstand the type of supply chain shock that we have seen with the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent geopolitical tension in Europe. Overall, we're actually seeing that the digital trade itself is embedded in every single sector. And we also seen that the coming of a mobile phone have actually facilitated the trade that exists within countries and across border on the continent. And we believe that digital trade is a driver of business growth. It's faster because of digital trade, because of digital is faster, it can be cheaper, and it becomes more accessible to a larger audience, also known as customers. And it's within this context that we are going to engage the various stakeholders who have been active within these sectors. And these stakeholders include the startups, the founder in particular, the innovation center, the policymakers, and the angel investors. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Fadila, for that overview of the of Africa's digital trade sector. So we're moving straight into the conversations now. We're going to be starting with the founders panel, which will be taken by Nanko. So Nanko, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Joining in from Abuja, Nigeria. I agree with Phil. Today is a lovely day with a lovely weather. I'm very excited about being here to have this conversation. My name is Nanko Madu, Director of Programs at AfriLabs. AfriLabs is a network organization of tech and innovation hubs across the continent. Joining me today is a group of very key experts, in the landscape of the investment and innovation in the digital trade sector. And I'm very excited about the conversation. Today's panel topic is, we'll be discussing on early and growth stage investments and innovation in Africa digital trade sector. And I'll just be calling on the panelists to join me. When I call and introduce you, it will be good to turn on your camera so that everyone can see you. So I'm gonna start by calling on Laurent Neutod. Laurent Neutod is the CEO of Nicobok. Nicobok is an online retail company allowing members of African diasporans to take care of their beloved ones back home. In 2012, Laurent received the 3rd African Orange Social Venture Prize for Nicobok. Prior to Nicobok, Laurent has worked in startups, international corporations, and consulting firms, including Bain & Company, where he implemented hybrid business models and led consulting projects for large corporations entering the base of the pyramid market with a focus on access to energy. Lauren, please turn on your camera and say hi.
Hi, Nanku, can you see me?
Yes.
Good.
Let me see. I can't see you. Hello, can you say hi again?
Hi.
Can everybody see Lauren?
Yes, yes, we can see Lauren, Nanko.
Maybe it's from my end then. Welcome to the panel conversation. Next, I want to invite Victor Maina. Victor Maina is the CEO and founder of Dohga. Victor is responsible for fostering a deep understanding of the company's vision, the competitive and market environments, and helping shape market strategies. Before founding Dohga, Mr. Victor Maina was Chief Commercial Officer, Sendi, where he led country managers in Africa under e-commerce, merchant enterprise, and freight business units. He is the VP Customer Experience, VP Growth and Data, VP Marketing, VP Expansion, and Commercial Projects. Previously, Victor worked for DHL Express as Head of Sales, East and Southern Africa. And while he was doing that, he led over 26 countries in the development and execution of the company's commercial strategies. Welcome, Victor. Please turn on your camera and say hi.
Hi, Nanko. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here and looking forward to the conversations.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next, I want to invite Ugonna Ginigema, who is the CEO of Varsity.com. He is the co-founder and CEO, like I said, of Varsity.com, which is a digital infrastructure business with a goal to transform how people and businesses carry out offline. He has been a cohort member of Microsoft Accelerator, Forbes Digital Accelerator Program, and 22 on Sloan South Africa Accelerator. Ugonna is also an alumni of Leap Africa Social Innovators Program and Y Combinator Startup School in the USA. He is an alumnus of University of Ibadan here in Nigeria, where he studied industrial and production engineering, and professionally, he is a graduate member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. Ugonna possesses professional certifications in areas like project management, enterprise, resource planning, public speaking, and leadership, to mention a few. Welcome, Ugonna. Please turn on your camera and say hi to the audience.
Thank you, Nanko. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Very glad to be here and looking forward to a fruitful conversation.
Yes, yeah, welcome. Glad to have you here too. Next, I will be calling on Chalka Slemi. Chalka Slemi graduated in 2014 from the University of Montpellier. He is the Collective Lab Director and for the Honoris United University, Tunisia. He graduated with a PhD in biology and health. He studied intestinal homeostasis and tumorigenesis. Sorry about that. After teaching and research in 2017, Chalka created the startup BioHemera to continue his R&D program. In 2019, Chalka was appointed director and manager of the startups incubator Collective Lab of the Honoris United Universities, where he leads a support program for innovative startups, 42 winning projects and 11 startups labeled Startup Act in 3 years, as well as the academic director of the Global MBA in Impact Entrepreneurship in partnership with the business school Altis in Milan, and the E4Impact Foundation. He is currently a founding member of the following social professional structure. The first is the Tunisian Association of Young Research Biologists, the National Union of Operators of the Biosector, that's Bio Tunisia, and cluster of companies in the sector of aromatic and medical plants, that's Wikipam. You're welcome, Chalka. Turn on your camera, please, and say hi to the audience.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Nanko, for this presentation. I'm very glad to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm waiting to discuss with you, to exchange many ideas and innovation about the digital sector in Africa. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So we'll get into the conversation right now. I really happy at the way that Fadila has really taken us through like the history of the investment and innovation in the Africa's digital trade sector. And as you've seen from the introduction, we have very, key stakeholders here represented who will be, giving us their own perspective of, what they have done in their different areas of expertise or areas of operations on this matter. To start, I'm gonna ask, right? I will start with Laurent. Laurent, the aftermath of COVID-19 shows a rise in the digital trade sector. I want to ask, has the investment climate post-COVID also shown a rise, and what role has it played in bolstering the sector?
So I think all the players involved in digital trade benefited from the effect of the COVID in more or less spectacular way. In our case, we grew by 45% in that year. That has brought quite an excitement on the industry. The challenge for some has been to keep this momentum. We saw, for instance, that in Europe or North America, after the end of COVID, that some e-commerce activities went a bit down. In our case, in Africa, we're glad that the momentum is still there, and we are keeping the new users that we got during the COVID crisis. I think it created a lot of excitement on businesses that are bringing very large volumes, but are still facing issues with economic viability. I think this is where we stand.
Thank you for that. I'm going to call Victor, from your own perspective, same, question, the aftermath of the COVID-19, it shows us a rise, as we have all seen and heard even Fadila say, in the digital trade sector. Okay, has the investment climate post-COVID shown a rise, and what role has it played in bolstering the digital sector? Digital trade sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as many have commented, it did really affect positively the investment climate in Africa, because everybody wanted to go, paperless, wanted to go contactless, and as a result, there was more businesses that, especially in the digital space, that were coming up. Duka is born last year, beginning of the year, at a time when this is, at its height. And we've seen great growth, we've seen great interest, even from an investment perspective. Just quoting one of the probably known players in this sector, Patek and the Big Deal. Patek, for example, I think saw a 5.2 billion investment in Africa, according to them, from 681 equity rounds, which could translate to 264%. That already is huge. Big Deal reported about 820 deals. Again, that was 73% year-on-year growth from 2020. In 2021 alone, these kind of statistics did and do show that indeed there was lots of interest. Africa benefited, commerce benefited, and the digital space. Post-COVID, what has happened, especially with the European crisis, I think it's also been widely reported that January to June, there was sort of a lot of vibrant investment, and then from July and even in June, actually from May, started dipping a little bit, and these are the crises. It doesn't dictate that Africa doesn't need these opportunities, or it doesn't dictate that there's no need for investment. I think it's been harder for founders to raise money post-COVID due to this crisis. We just managed to raise $2 million ourselves in our seed round. But I think if it was immediately after that, it would have been a little bit harder to do that. However, I think one of the things that we've seen also post-COVID was the fact that more experienced founders in the African space, either who had worked for corporates, for one reason or the other, jumped and were more risk, had a higher risk appetite to sort of get into this space. And I think that's the most interesting thing to me, because I feel that we've always needed Africans to create solutions for Africans, because they can see these, they're affected more directly. And so by them doing that, I think what we've ended up seeing is probably more better run startups than previously, which is a good thing. And I think will only, drive the African trade better.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I agree, and well done on the pre-seed fund that you just raised. That's really good to hear and encouraging. So I would like to call on Chaka now. The digital trade sector in North Africa is one of the fastest rising sectors in terms of investment in the North African region. What would you say are the driving factors of these investments, taking into cognizance that a startup in your organization, 3Y Digital, just got funded through the Catalytic Africa program being implemented by ABAN and AfriLabs with 60,000 euros.
Thank you, Nico, for this question. So first, let me give you a clear example here. When we talk about this sector, the digital sector, and the effect after the pandemic of COVID. So we start working with Collective Lab with some special program in incubation and acceleration in September 2019. All projects, first of all, are in the health tech, for example, sector, agri-tech, industry, and service. After the pandemic, COVID pandemic in 2020, more than 60% of the proposed new projects are in digital and e-service. So we think that we have a great impact in the idea and the creativity and the potential innovation of some startups here in Tunisia and in Africa. So through our cohorts, we have 3 cohorts. We have 140 jobs, contractual and permanent, are created within the startup founded in the digital sector. The data is representative of the state of affairs in Tunisia and in the Maghreb countries. So among these startups, we have accompanied the startups FreeWe. FreeWe is startups is a mobile application that offers user promotion on all sector of goods or service by providing users with promotional codes to benefit from offers. So FreeWe had just raised with Catalytic Africa program 16,000 euro to further develop their service and market. And in the end, the driving factor behind this rise in digital investments are market needs, competition, the need of innovation, and to respond to fairly demanding local and regional markets, as well as the rapid adaptability of an entire entrepreneurial ecosystem, because the objective of African startups, when we talk about Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, South Africa, or Nigeria, is to validate the service or the product locally, and then to export this service international. And let me talk about the adaptability of the etatic or governmental or private sector for this pandemic statement. It's that we think that the digital and e-commerce sector has undergone a significant increase both in the number of startups in Africa, Tunisia, or other, and automatically in the rate of investment declaration. So the phenomenon has been accentuated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Companies are sometimes forced to go completely digital by creating an interactive platform and mobile application. And all sectors have been affected. And suddenly they have tried to develop what is missing for easy and efficient contact with customers. When we talk about B2C or B2B clients, they have directly try to implement the component fintech, online payment, home delivery, etc. And it is normal that this investment has followed the wave of this innovation in the sector, in the digital sector. At the level of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Tunisia, initiation to this sector have been very developed, especially taking into consideration that those who do not go digital risk to have a lot of losses, especially when they no longer have contact with their customers. And the ultimate objective with this digital sector is to facilitate life and for the customers by this factor of innovation. So in Africa, we have to say to our startups, we have to innovate, we have to put this digital sector like a priority to more and more make investment and make a good product and service. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Chaka, for that take on digital, and I couldn't agree more. We need to, that's the future, right? It's where we've evolved to. It is a future. So the sooner we begin to, push more for people, particularly on the continent where, connectivity and digitalization is not as penetrated as other, developed worlds. The better for us. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to quickly call on Ugonna.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ugonna, let's talk logistics. The African logistics remains at infancy. When you look at the intracity, national logistics, it's hindered by marginal cost challenges and just the lack of enabled infrastructures. How do you mitigate those, in the work that you're doing? How do you mitigate those and ensure that you, still make progress and keep pushing to be successful in what you do?
All right. Thank you, Nanko. So when you think about logistics, right, it's a bit complex. But the simple solution is you cannot have, I don't think logistics in Nigeria and Africa, when you think about intracity logistics or information, you can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. For example, the logistics strategy or process you would need to move products or a product from point A to point B might differ from what you would need to move product from point C to point D, right? So you need to be able to, first of all, innovate, design processes that work. You need to be able to segment, what would work here and what won't work here. So, and then you need to leverage a lot on partnerships. So we, work with so many different logistics companies. We've designed highly efficient processes, and these processes depend on the kind of products being moved, the locations the product is moved from, and then the last mile as well. Because you can't, like I said, you can't have a one size fits all. So there's need for innovation. And when you think about logistics, there are three major factors that would determine the success or failure of any logistics system. One is time, then there's cost, and there's quality as well. Now, most people want products delivered fast, but they don't want to pay the costs of that quick delivery, assuming there's an option to even deliver it fast, right? So you're trying to optimize for time, and you're also trying to optimize for cost while ensuring that quality is maintained throughout the entire logistics cycle. So I think there's need to, for aggressive partnerships, there's need to have a system that is hyper-local, because the way we think about it is, like it or not, products move to most places, right? How we get there might differ, but products move from point A to point B, whether it's via road, you're using a truck via road, bike, car, bus, whatever, products move. That's the most important thing. So you need to be able to understand, how do these products move today to these locations, and how can you optimize those processes? Who can you partner with? What sort of technology can you build or put in place to make it efficient, easy for the users, easy for your partners, you know. So these are some of the things we've done and that has worked for us and is working for us. So I'll just say you need to innovate, right? You need to leverage on collaborations and partnerships, and then you need to also have some underlying technology that can manage this logistics processes for you as a business and ensure that you're able to satisfy your customers and basically your clients. So these are some of the things we've done to solve the challenge of logistics.
Amazing. I really like the fact that you really talked about leveraging on partnerships, because it definitely makes things easier. So your problem will most likely have been solved by someone else, or someone else will have gone through that. So it's always easy to look into those partnerships to be able to make work easy. Thank you so much for that, Ogonna. I'm gonna go back to Victor. Victor, I mean, as someone who has been in the digital trade sector for over 10 years, you know, what are trends of investments? What are the trends of investments you've seen in digital trade sector? What do investors need to know about the African digital trade sector in relation to its opportunities, its prospects, and risks?
Yeah, so it's quite a heavy question. So break it down in a way that, one of the things that I've seen is that, and again, it's clear, it's out there, is that fintech is winning. It's been one of those sectors that investors are really interested in, and it's good. I think it's also born, you have a few unicorns in Africa born out of that particular ecosystem. But there are more sectors that are attracting more and more attention. You can think of logistics. Logistics is huge. If you ask me, having spent also a lot of time within that space doing logistics and now e-commerce, I think it's one of the most vibrant sectors and very huge, and one of those things that we need to fix if at all Africa is going to awaken as a sleeping giant. Of course, retail tech is huge. Education, edtech is huge. Agri-tech and food security. We need healthy Africa, healthy nations, of course, do perform better from an economic perspective. And of course, energy goes on without saying that there's still a lot of unconnected people from an energy perspective in Africa. And there's a lot that we can do. I think in all those sectors also do carry with them impact. If you think of something that like commerce, we keep saying when you tie it to logistics, it adds up to 320% of the cost of goods. For a continent where 40–50% of the people are living under $2 a day, it goes without saying that that money is being spent on food, and hence we need to be able to lower the cost of food that is on the table every evening or every morning for our brothers and sisters. Now, there's also another aspect of that question that you've asked, what do investors need to know? I think interacting with the investors for years now, one of the things that I've realized is that if somebody is not focused in Africa as an investor and they haven't spent so much time, they probably need hand-holding for a bit. And this would help them, because there's a bit of that opportunity that you see when you come to Africa, especially for the first time. It will hit you how huge or rather many opportunities are screaming at you. We had one in Kenya where a founder raised 1.1 million, blew it within a year, then closed shop and left. They couldn't do anything with it because when they came to the country, they saw there's a huge opportunity, and you think you pour money to the problem, it will turn to profit. But it's not the case. And so there's need of an intricate process as an investor to unlock that. For me, what I've found works is focusing on the founder. If the founder has substance with them, if the experience carrying within the African ecosystem and markets, they can sort of do a little bit better. Of course, the opportunity comes in. How big is the opportunity? The application of that opportunity in various countries and population, that also does help a lot. And of course, even looking at the team that he has built. So investors need to know also that Africa needs patience. There's a lot of policy that is yet to be developed. We have news that have broken the last 1 month of a fintech unicorn, from Africa that is really struggling my country, mainly because of a policy issue. You expand too fast without patience and without intricacy in terms of where you are going to expand. You will lose a lot of money, like they have lost. And they're not the only ones. More are dying without us, writing about them in TechCrunch and the papers, only because if that patience is not there and a bit of process followed in terms of how you expand, then sooner or later there'll be a challenge. The other aspect of your question that you've asked is in regards to things like policy. I think the government needs to be supported in Africa. And I think what we haven't seen is more tech founders that are going back to their governments and saying, hey, can we relook at these policies? Can I support based on what I saw happening from a startup perspective? We don't see many young people running for political office. Of course, startups carry with them lots of young blood, and as a result, they're not represented as greatly. And so there's need for inclusion, need for more probably investors with smart money that can go talk to governments for policy. One shoe fits all approach where governments are borrowing policies from across the world and pasting it and using it as their own is not clearly working. Again, going with what my country has done. And so that is something that is yet to be unlocked and a conversation that needs to be had. But having said that, there's lots of positivity in the African market. No one should shy away, just being more careful, being more intricate in how they follow a process or that formula that works for them. And I think founders in Africa are also really developing, and we are seeing more experienced founders that are, folding their shirts and, or rather their sleeves of their shirts and jumping into the murky waters and doing what needs to be done, which is really going to be the game changer for investors and also the game changer for startups.
Thank you so much, Victor. So much that you said there. Yeah, definitely as an investor, if you're coming into Africa, then there's the need for the mindset change, right? You need to be patient. You need to understand that the terrain here is different, and the policies, what makes this, somebody can have an excellent, idea, excellent venture, but the policies can cripple it. So all of these things are very important to note as you come into the continent and identify potential startups to invest in. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, sorry for that. I'd like to call on Laurent. Yeah, Laurent, of all the funding that came into Africa in 2021, 7% went to the e-commerce sector. What makes an innovation in the digital trade sector viable and attractive to investors? Also, as an innovator, what has been your biggest challenge in getting investments?
I will start with viability, and I think I will echo a little bit what Victor and you just said about patience and big opportunity. Talking about viability, I think it's always the same. You have two ways to achieve it. Or you go for a niche and you're viable earlier, or you go for the mass market. In the case of our company, we went for the niche route, what enabled us to be viable faster. Why? Because we work for the diaspora. So this was a segment with already large group of people familiar with e-commerce and using credit card, what avoided a lot of problem. Plus, they were okay to pay a small premium for the service. So the trade-off, and this is linked to your point on patience, because we achieve viability, but I think it's a bit less exciting when you start with a niche in terms of scale. Now, if you want to go for the mass market, I think the challenge has been on the last year and on the early years of digital trade in Africa, that you need to build the full infrastructure from product sourcing last mile delivery. I think we have to have, all of us, we have to have in mind that I think in the USA now, when you're talking about startup in e-commerce or digital trade, it's about finding the best way to be on the top of the list of Amazon Marketplace. So a very thin and accurate point. In our case, in Africa, we're still about building the full platform. So again, the opportunity is much bigger, but there is plenty of work. I think things have changed because what nobody said so far is that we had a lot of failures in the first wave of e-commerce, I think 10 years ago. And I think because I think people didn't realize that we needed to build this full infrastructure, and this requires either a lot of money or a lot of time. And I think things have changed because now you have players that have built a full infrastructure, or, and back to Unyona point on logistics, you have now people that are, I think, filling some gaps on the value chain. So now you have people solving the payment issue on African market. You have people solving the last mile delivery on African market. So I think now, this is now that there is probably the big opportunity to go faster. So again, your question was a bit about viability and attracting investor. And I think in the past, this could be a trade-off because you have the choice of being viable or building the story and the business to attract investor to tap the mass market. But I think some people didn't realize how long or how cost expensive it would be. I think, again, things have changed a little bit now. And I think the last point I would say, if I were in the shoes of an investor, is I think it will be a bit like in the fintech space. I think the things that will scale fast are the things that are not requiring people to change their behavior, but just making existing behavior more productive and more fluid. And this requires to work with the informal economy, which is, I think, the main opportunity.
Thank you. Hi, Lawrence.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I like when you said opportunity, there's an opportunity to go faster, you know, just in the landscape, and I totally agree with that. We've come to the end of we've come to the end of this session. Very vibrant and interesting conversation. Some key takeaways is one, as we develop, you know, policies on the continent around startups that will be ready for investment, early and growth stage startups, there's a need for inclusion in developing these policies. Okay. Also, how we can leverage on partnerships. You know, as a founder, it's important to leverage on partnerships. It makes the work easy. And just right now, we heard that there's an opportunity to go faster on the continent in this area. So very much thank you for this session. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you to Eban and BC4A. I'll hand over to Phil now. Phil, over.
Right, we're just going to move to the next panel session, which once again, Tarek, would like to invite you to open up your camera and lead this session as the moderator.
Thank you, Fadila, for having me again for this early stage growth investments innovation for the digital trade sector. I'd like to first start by welcoming our panelists, please. So may you turn on your cameras. We have Summer Luaiti, Sarkis Saleh, Melanie, and Sinmi. If you can turn on your cameras, and let's start with a round of brief introductions, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I can start if you want, Tarek.
Please, Sarkis.
Cool. Is my camera on? Everyone can see me, hopefully.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, my name is Sarkis Saleh. I am one of the founders of an e-commerce development agency called ITQ Digital. We have a presence in the UK and also a presence in the Gambia, West Africa, where I'm from. And yeah, looking forward to discussion on today's panel. It's been really interesting to hear the thoughts of some of the founders who have just spoken. And yeah, looking forward to engaging and chatting about the topic today.
Thank you, Sarkis. Melanie.
Yes, good evening. An honor to be here. My name is Melanie Mchinzi from the Zambia Business Angel Network, and I'm really honored to be here. Was really happy to hear some of the information that was coming out of the founders. Excited to see what's going to happen with the ISIS Summit. Looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Sinmi.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know where everybody's connected from. It's my privilege to be here. It's been an engaging session so far. I hope that I can learn a thing or two from my co-panelists here and also share some thoughts on my experience across the African startup ecosystem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if Summer is here.
Yes, I am here. Nice to meet you, everybody.
Disguised. You're disguised under Fadila's name, so.
Okay. So I'm also glad to be here. I'm the co-founder and president of Bridging Angels, which is a network of angels investing in high potential African startups based mainly on diaspora, African diaspora.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And just to give you a brief introduction about myself, I'm the founder and chairman of the Mediterranean Angel Investors Network and also the Alexandria Business Angel Network based in Egypt, also a board member of ABAN, and I'm happy to continue building on this exciting discussion. So, you know, starting with what's happening in the economy and what's happening, you know, with the trade volumes that are threatened by a global economy, generally speaking, and the tensions happening between countries, but yet supply chains are continuing to become more international, drawing many parties from around the world. So, you know, these trade ecosystems act as online platforms that facilitate these exchanges between platforms, focusing on different sectors. So maybe we can begin with the e-commerce section and getting some insights about what is happening and what are the insights from the background of Sarkis. You can begin and tell us more about e-commerce and your background in that regards.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tariq. I think I'm actually doing a talk next week with one of our strategic partners on the effects that COVID and Brexit has had on e-commerce. And I think a lot of the things, or a lot of the elements that have impacted e-commerce businesses over the last 3 or 4 years have been quite similar across the globe. If I just focus on Africa and my take on it, I think that there, in some ways, I think one of the colleagues on the call mentioned that the pandemic has almost helped improve certain areas around e-commerce like logistics and payments. But I think one of the biggest challenges that are facing the e-commerce landscape in Africa at the moment are 4 points really that I like to sort of cover when I do these type of sessions. 4 areas of consumer-facing challenges, business-facing barriers, challenges, infrastructural challenges, and regulatory challenges. And if I just touch on the first item in terms of consumer-facing challenges, I think that some of the biggest barriers to growth at the moment are mistrust in a way. The African e-commerce landscape is not as mature as the rest of the world, and I think businesses and consumers within Africa are not used to digitally trading online between countries, if you like. If you look at some of the the biggest countries in Africa when it comes to e-commerce. You've got South Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria, Kenya, Senegal, Nigeria, I think Ghana and Ivory Coast are some of the biggest players, if you like, in the e-commerce ecosystem. But there's another 44 countries or so in Africa that don't take a lion's share of the amount of digital trade that's happening online. And I think a lot of that comes down to mistrust and not being used to being in that environment. So I think there's certainly been improvements over the last 4 or 5 years where digital literacy is on the increase on the continent. And someone was mentioning earlier in terms of the governments of the various nations almost coming to the table to ensure that digital skills and I guess a digital way of thinking is introduced at the grassroots and part of the education system, because it's all well and good having investors and having bright young minds with great ideas, but if the ecosystem around it doesn't support it, so when that comes to customer service, logistics, payment methods or payment platforms, it's sort of, you're bringing together a puzzle, but there's many pieces missing to it. And what I've seen over the years is a lot of online businesses getting funding, having the really bright, intelligent founders behind them, but not succeeding because of those other barriers that have been caused by the ecosystem that exists. And one of the things that I always say to people is that I think that consumer habits have changed massively out of COVID, especially. People all over the world now expect to get value for money, expect to get everything delivered to them, and expect not to pay, an arm and a leg for it. So there is a massive, I guess, wave of enthusiasm where people want to shop online, regardless of where they are in the world, and they want convenience and they want everything at their fingertips. And a lot of businesses in Africa need to take advantage of this wave that we're currently on. But governments and the whole community around the ecosystem need to pull together to ensure that it's not just one piece of the puzzle that's solved, but all the different components that make digital trade happen essentially all need to come together, and people need to work together to really make that happen. Otherwise, I think what we'll find is we'll find loads of exciting new companies getting investment, but not quite reaching the heights and the expectations that they think they could reach, because other elements of the system are letting them down. So I hope that sort of answered it in a roundabout way. There's a lot of positives. The e-commerce revenue is supposed to reach about $75 billion by 2025 in Africa, but the whole marketplace is roughly about $9 trillion per annum worldwide, and that's not even 1%. So for a continent that is rich in resources, rich in products, either for export or for selling locally, and has some, a great pool of intelligent resource that is latching on to this digital age that we're in, less than 1% of world trade from digital trade is not really, it should be more than that. And I think that just shows that a lot needs to happen to bring all these pieces of the puzzle together so that it's sort of a combined, solid foundations, basically, to ensure that online businesses can be a success in Africa.
Thank you, Sarkis. And we're getting already some comments and some questions coming in. We'll keep those questions till the end. We have a couple of questions for our panelists, and then we can, open the floor if you have any comments. So moving to Samar, like your take on, as a fellow engineer coming from an engineering background also, on that digital trade, especially when you're working with, the African diaspora and investing in Africa, but also working with different NGOs. Your perspective on the future of digital trade during what's happening now and with, coming out of the pandemic and moving into the economic downturn that is approaching. Actually, we're in a recession. I don't want to be negative.
Yeah, recession. Yes. I mean, worldwide, it is. I mean, a problem for everybody, not only for Africa, but I think for Africa there is still room of progress, mainly on the digital side. As mentioned, in fact, during the last workshop about with founders, also, it is clear that there is a digital gap, and the delivery process, e-commerce and digital trade is tightly linked, of course, to delivery and to logistics. That has been already explained, so I will not go through it again. And I think in Africa, we have a big room of improvement there. As mentioned earlier, the big problems encountered by digital trade in Africa, for me at least, are really infrastructure. So the digital gap, the gender gap also in digital access, the regulation also for cross-border exchanges. So all these challenges make the African ecosystem still, a field of opportunity for new digital e-commerce businesses, which is really different from what we see in Europe or in other countries, where this sector is really a mature sector, and where the penetration of these of this sector is very, very difficult. So, for example, as an investor that I invest both in Europe and also in Africa, in Europe, I don't have any appetite of investing in digital trade because of this difficulty of penetrating the market. But in Africa, it is another story. So there are plenty of challenges, and we hugely invest, in fact, in startups that show their ability to overcome the challenges we are facing, and mainly, as mentioned at the beginning, the infrastructure ones and the regulation ones. And we are obliged, we are investor from the diaspora. One of our aim, of course, our first aim is to have value on our investments, and to find the next African unicorn. But also there is a party of give back, and we want really to these startups to help solve the challenges that the continent is facing. And that's why digital trade, I think, is still an opportunity. We don't forget that Jumia, of course, the first African unicorn, comes from the digital trade area, and there is much, still room of improvement, as I told you before. And I don't know if it answers your question. So please, tell me if you want me to explain more some of the points that I mentioned.
It makes perfect sense, Summer, and we're getting, trying to get bits and pieces of understanding from different perspectives, of course, and maybe moving also to Sinmi and getting also your insights. You've been across different sectors, and what I'm concerned about also is that these digital trade ecosystems for the past several years have been developed by maybe bank consortia or leaders in the financial sectors have been competing to develop these platforms and creating those ecosystems for certain regulatory work like KYC and due diligence and stuff like that. But some of these efforts have yielded in generating a lot of SMEs as opposed to startups, and maybe these small and medium businesses don't have the capability to grow and scale as startups. So maybe from your end, and from you having different backgrounds in different sectors, What is your take on that?
All right, thank you. So if I was starting a business in the early 2000s, I have to think of about 20, 30, 40, 50 other things. If I was to start the startup today, all I need is a technical co-founder, if I'm not a technical person, my laptop, and an internet. So what does that tell us? There's been a lot of improvements. It's not as bad as it used to be. For example, if you leverage open banking APIs, you could literally start whatever startup, solving whatever problem around the digital ecosystem by not necessarily building that capability in all of these functional areas. For example, somebody spoke earlier around collaborations and partnerships. So these are some of the beauty of what we have seen. However, if you look at a lot of the challenges that I see, most of the fintechs around are solving problems. We're literally scratching the surface. There was a research I did when Konga, failed in Nigeria. For those of us that are familiar with the Konga e-commerce platform, and Jumia was struggling and all of that. It was outstanding to find that there was no unique customer. So it's the same SIMI on this particular platform that is also buying. So in terms of scaling that capability to expand the digital ecosystem, we're not there yet. If you look at internet penetration in Africa, it's only about 3.1%, averagely, less than 45%. Global would average is about 60%. So these are the underlying infrastructure that can then start to drive some of these initiatives. Then to also piggyback on some of the experiences that I also had, we experienced a lot of service disruptions due to COVID-19, especially around logistics and moving things around Africa. And one of the major challenges we really had was around payments. So how can Africa really grow or facilitate digital trade if the core of trading, which is payment for exchange of goods or services, is not technically being fixed? Another problem is around movement of people. And I'm not talking about goods. I'm even talking about business movements, for example. It's easier for me to move from Nigeria to London by air than for me to move from Nigeria to Benin, which is literally about 2 hours drive away from where I am. So these are some of the underlying infrastructural problems that I think we need to start focusing on. So I don't want to talk about what a couple of the panelists have spoken about around regulations and all of that. But then again, all is not all gloom, because there is value in Africa. This is where all the frictions are. This is where the problems are. And I think that with time, Africa will start to fix a lot of these problems, and we can then start to unlock opportunities that then attract the right kind of investors that have the right understanding of the African market, that has the right patience for the African market, to then help us grow the digital ecosystem in Africa.
Thank you, Sinmi. And moving to Melanie, and with your angel network and where your background is, we talked about how things have progressed and how things were in the past, and now where we are now, and how does the future look like, and what are your members and the investors that are you're associated with are looking into these current times, and how do they look at Africa specifically, within, of course, assuming that you're mainly investing around Africa.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I will say from the angel investor perspective, what we noticed was that so when COVID-19 hit up until now, I will say that as a network, we saw the most investments and the most deals done and closed. And out of the investments that we made, I would say 2 out of 4 are sort of digital trade, e-commerce, tech kind of investments. And from the companies that we usually have that are pitching before the angels and pitching their ideas, so the startups that come through, almost 60% of them are people that are pitching tech and fintech sort of ideas. And I would say that from the angel investor perspective, investment in digital trade sort of businesses and fintech have grown. Ed tech as well has really grown. There's a lot of improvement around working and collaborating with partnerships with the innovation hubs has helped a lot. help the angel networks a lot. And we're sort of getting kind of focused investments. But the investors, I would say generally, are really ready to invest and invest in many ways more than just capital, to also hold the hand of the startup and sort of mentor them and educate them so that they don't make the same mistakes that they probably made in their time. But I would say that right now, Africa is very ripe, generally speaking. And tech is really something that's happening around. I mean, things like STEM, the introduction of STEM, which is science, tech, engineering, and mathematics in the education system being incorporated, is really helping the startup ecosystem, and people really embrace digital trade and tech. And I would say that there is a gap, but we're grateful for that gap because there's an opportunity that that gap presents. And the investors are generally ready to sort of hold their sleeves and dig into that and really invest in that. So from our perspective as an angel network, I can definitely say that investors are ready, and they do realize that there is, of course, risk involved, but it's a risk that most of them generally are willing to take. They understand what's really involved in it, and they're willing to dive in and hold hands with the startups in that area.
Thank you, Melanie. What about like legislation? And this is a question for anyone to pick on. With all the countries that we have in Africa and all the different regulations that we have, are you seeing progress in specific countries and when it comes to legislation in general? We understand, of course, from the startup side that the opportunities and the mentorship and the opportunity to make use of what's happening these times, the past, I call the past 3 years as an obligatory digital transformation for all the world. But right now, a lot of things that entail these changes that are happening. So, just for anyone to give their take on what's happening in terms of regulation and legislation.
All right, let me share some of the new experience that we've been experiencing in Nigeria. Generally around the power sector, there's been a lot of positives. As some of you may be aware, we have power sector challenges. So obviously, it's gradually becoming a case of emergency. So as a matter of urgency, there has been a lot of legislation around improving that particular sector. But then again, if you look at it holistically from a digital perspective, I can remember somebody who said on this call that we need a lot of young people participate in governance, because this is where the innovation is driven from. This is where people that are very much familiar with the challenges, that can relate with the day-to-day frictions that we face, this is where it all comes from. So I think that one of the things that we can start to do is to then start to drive that narrative, and platforms like this can really, really help. And what I mean is founders, investors, or stakeholders need to put some sort of framework, some sort of document or body of work in front of policymakers, with a lot of support, collaborate, because at the end of the day, we are an entity. Africa is Africa. We have to solve our problems. And luckily, we don't really need to create new thinking from scratch. A lot of the works have been done across other continents. We can adapt, we can tweak, and sort of see how it suits the African narrative.
Thank you, Sinmis. Thank you. And I touching upon the regulatory part also, we've seen a lot of, in Egypt specifically, a lot of startups that have started solving problems, let's say in the fintech sector, that also is part of that ecosystem of that digital trade sector. And only to find they are like hitting a brick wall because they're regulated by the central bank. They need a license to be able to operate. This kind of activity that they're doing needs to go, undergo different approaches and more complications. What I have seen that has been done, some improvements, significant improvements in Egypt, is that the central bank has created a sandbox that all fintech startups that are involved in whatever activities that they're doing, whether it's fintech or fintech enabled, they would go into the sandbox so that they would expedite the licenses and to just get a green light, let's say, that this activity would be regulated by anybody, or it doesn't have to be regulated. So I think the sandbox was a great thing, and you know, also Melanie was talking about and Summer also about those innovation hubs, and I think they're playing a big role in terms of making sure that these young entrepreneurs are actually not just innovating in business models, but also innovating in the industry itself, and making sure that they are solving real problems. They're capitalizing on, because you know, all these challenges will only generate opportunities, but you know, being able to address these challenges in a positive way and making sure that you're on the right track is what we are looking at as investors, of course, to support, mentor, and invest. Maybe just, you know, considering time, I think we only have a few minutes left. We would open the floor to some questions to our panelists. And I think we had Laurent wanted to comment on a few things on Sarkis's points. So Laurent, if you want to type your questions in the chat or shoot questions.
I can try to speak fast, Tarek, if you agree, but if you prefer me to write, I can. Up to you. What do you prefer?
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So just one thing, I think we have much less challenges in digital trade than in fintech regarding regulation. We do have, but I mean, the sector is a bit simpler. However, nobody talked about tax and fiscality. I think there is a big issue on VAT because you can work with players that don't work with VAT, either because they don't want to, or either because they are in some specific niche that allow them not to play with the VAT. But this is something very important in the industry, and I think this can be a risk for some of the companies. Now, I just wanted to comment on Sarkis' points earlier, because he said we see a lot of great projects failing because the ecosystem was not ready. Well, somehow he said that. And I would just want to comment on that, on regulation or on the missing section of the value chain. This is our job. I mean, as entrepreneurs, if we decide to go, we have to assess the gaps and decide if we are going to make or buy. But if it's not available, we have to solve it. Otherwise, we don't enter the market. And I think we shouldn't wait for all these issues to be solved, because the opportunity again is now. So I think this is what is exciting on our market. We have a lot of challenges, but we have large opportunity. And the people who are going to make the difference are the ones who can survive with this challenge and find the good ways to address it. That's all.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, go on, please.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say, Laurent, that yeah, I completely agree. And if some of what I said came across negatively, that's not my intention.
No, not negatively. I think you were very kind with entrepreneurs, maybe too much. I think we have no excuse. We should solve the solutions. I think it was very nice to you, but I mean, people who enter the market and are saying the ecosystem is not ready, I'm sorry, but they shouldn't enter the market, or they have the solution to address the current ecosystem, because we need to seek for partnership to solve the problem. But if the partners are not around, we need to be ready to do it ourselves. Otherwise, at one point or the other, I'm sure you're going to fail. You need to be able to survive, to tackle the opportunity, to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think maybe something I missed out is that I think one of the gaps is that there's a lot of investors, founders, entrepreneurs that want to ride the wave of starting a business where they're selling a product or service. But what they should maybe be looking at is fulfilling some of the gaps in the capabilities that are missing, like logistics, for example, which is a massive one, a last mile. So what I was trying to, the point I was trying to make is that very often a lot of businesses get the wrong advice, and they think they can sell online, but then they miss the gaps, and then there's not the capital or the financing to fill those gaps, or the partners, for example. And I think what needs to be done is there's opportunity for gaps in the services that are missing to fulfill and sort of complete that puzzle in the whole e-commerce ecosystem, businesses and investors should focus on those gaps as well as selling a product or a service online. Was my point.
Yeah. Clear. Thank you.
There's massive potential, absolute massive potential, and in my experience, the more individuals and organizations that pull together to try and fill all those gaps, the quicker it will mature and the quicker it will be more successful. Because I think what we don't want to happen is you have in Europe, for example, a lot of online businesses that are extremely successful, and then they get bought out by the likes of Amazon or Alibaba, and you lose that quality of product, and you lose that customer service. So, for example, a lot of people don't know, if you take AWS hosting away from the Amazon group, Amazon online loses money, and it's been losing money for the last 5 or 6 years. It's not a profitable business. The only thing that makes it look good is it's part of a wider group where hosting services and stuff make a lot of money. So I always tell people, if you have a product and your product is good quality and you understand your customer base, sell to your customer, sell to where your customer is. Don't just sell anywhere, sort of like a D2C approach. And I think longevity in online businesses is when independent businesses stay independent and they don't get swallowed up by these big companies like Amazon and Alibaba, who ultimately, in my view, destroy the essence of what that product or service was in the first place. And you lose some of the customer service. And it's really important that the ecosystem around it is really, really solid. Otherwise, it's something that'll just fall flat on its face in 5 or 10 years, and the cycle will have to start again. And that's what you don't want.
Thanks, Sarkis. And I think, Summer, you had something to add to Lauren's.
Yes, but I will just comment what just has been said also about Alibaba, Amazon, etc. Just to remind everybody here that China global leadership came, also from the e-commerce and the digital trade world, thanks to Alibaba, to Baidu, and to Tencent, which are the 3 e-commerce platforms that drove the digital economy and the economy in general of China. So we need to continue to invest in Africa in the digital trade, and to lobby also with the government, with the public policy makers in order to invest. So governments need to invest also in infrastructure, despite the fact that I agree on what has been said also, that startups are there also to solve the challenges and to find ways even when the way is not existing. But governments need to continue to invest in infrastructure, and all of the presence here that are ecosystem players, ecosystem builders, I think it's our role also to encourage governments to enlarge the free trade area in Africa, for example, in order to facilitate cross-border exchanges, etc. So it is really important to enlarge this area as much as possible. And also there is another opportunity that is being propagated now in Africa more and more, in Tunisia recently also, which is the digital identification. So there are of course dangers and privacy dangers, so we need to be cautious. But imagine the opportunity it offers to have a digital identification in all African countries for digital trade and e-commerce. This will be a huge opportunity. So it was just to give positive also ideas and trends in order to continue investing in digital trade sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Summer, so much. Keeping an eye on time, I think we've ran out of time. I'd like to thank you all for being with us today on the panel. And I'd like to thank ABAN for organizing that and all the partners. Back to you, Fadila.
All right. Thank you so much, Tarek, for hosting this, for moderating this session. And thank you to all the panelists. I would like now to take the opportunity to also thank all our participants for this webinar this evening, and to thank the first panelists for the first panel. We're very grateful. Once again, this session was brought to you by ABAN and VC4A. There's a little announcement that I would like to make. I don't know if the Secretariat now can move on to the announcement page. Please carry on. Yeah, just to remind you that this year's ACES event will happen between the 2nd and the 4th of November 2022. And of course, just to remind everyone, this is the largest annual early stage investor gathering on the continent. And we have been doing this since 2014. It is for investors and by investors. So if you are interested in getting involved in one way or another to ACES 2020, kindly contact us. You can send an email directly to Natalie Miller. And on this page, you'll see that email is just underneath. Natalie at AfricanInvestorSummit.com. You can also contact the ABAN Secretariat at secretariat@abanangels.org if you have any question. And on this note, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I would love to wish you a very, very well end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.